Hello and welcome back to the FrontLine Security Podcast. With me today is Ozan Elmaz, a former police officer and a man with years of experience in the security industry. Now today we're going to be talking all about his journey and in particular the use of force. We'll be discussing the legalities, the common mistakes that security professionals do make, and some things that the police look for when force is used. Here's what's coming up.
Your conflict management skills has to be there. These people are drunk, they're going to say all sorts, and we're there to just take it and just deal with it. If you want good security operatives, invest some time and money in training your security operatives, and that's what should be happening. What the police are looking for is, how did you feel? I had a genuine fear for my safety. He swung at me.
And what would you say are the main mistakes that security professionals do make? So, Ozzie, first of all, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Should we start right at the beginning of your career? So what first made you get into the security industry?
Yeah, so at a young age, I was always into sort of training, martial arts, and I never really saw myself doing a 9 to 5 in an office. So I was in my teens, around 18 years old, I went into I got the opportunity. I was training in an academy, and back then, a lot of this is pre-SIA, by the way. So back then it was, the security companies were very much known faces, boxing clubs, Muay Thai clubs, martial arts clubs. And I used to compete when I was younger as well. So, and my coach actually had his own security company as well. So it was very natural to kind of go from, I was training with him. I've been training with him since I was 9 years old. So imagine all those years training. And then when the opportunity came, he sort of took me on board and started showing me the ropes.
And you started off as a kind of door supervisor roles at working in pubs and clubs.
Yeah, it was very much, it was very much just, a lot of the contracts that he had was door supervisor roles, down the city, West End, some very interesting places, strip clubs, so I'll leave it there. But some very, very interesting places that I worked at, some celebrity clubs as well. So it was great because I'm really thankful for being introduced into the industry, actually, because at a very young age, I was introduced to this whole kind of exciting new world. I've done a lot of celebrity clubs as well, in West End as well, at a very young age. So to have that opportunity was great.
Yeah, I can imagine it's very exciting being 18, 19 years old and going to these incredibly fancy venues.
Oh, yeah. It was like at first, it was a bit daunting. Like, I learned a lot very quick at a very young age. Probably things I shouldn't have learned at that age. So I had to kind of pick it up quite quickly.
An eye-opening experience.
Yeah.
And then after that, you then transitioned into a role in law enforcement as a police officer. What made you make that transition?
So I was working, obviously, as we just said, working in security, and back then, the local hangouts was I remember back then it was the local hangouts was like snooker clubs and pool clubs, and I remember a friend of mine walking in, and I never actually I know it sounds strange, but I didn't actually set out to kind of become a policeman. So my friend came in with this application form and a laptop and stuff, and he was like, he kind of coerced me into doing the application with him, and it was like, come on, let's do it together. And I think for me, I kind of sensed that he just wanted me to kind of go along that journey with him. So it was kind of like to kind of support him on that journey. I didn't really have much expectations, and this is because while I was doing that, while I was actually, when I actually applied for the police, before that I had actually started a personal training course as well. So I was doing security and I was doing a personal training course because, again, the whole martial arts training thing, security, again, very physical. I wanted to be a personal trainer, which I did do as well. I passed, but then from the time I applied, put the application in, next thing you know, I've done the personal training course. Next thing you know, I've got this letter of acceptance and I'm going through all the trials. And next thing you know, I'm in Hendon doing the training, and I'm in a uniform on a response team in a car. So it kind of just happened very quickly.
I suppose it matched quite well as well that you didn't want to be behind a desk. You wanted to be out there doing practical things.
Exactly. And it was a really good experience. I learned so much there.
And what kind of things were you doing with the police?
So I started off in response. I think most people when you start off is response anyway. And throughout my years, done attachments with various units, done attachments with CID, plainclothes, which was really, really cool. You're out there in plainclothes, sort of hanging around, catching people in the act of doing things, which is easier because obviously when someone sees a policeman in uniform, they don't usually do things in front of a policeman. So yeah, that was quite cool.
And then you transitioned back to the security industry.
Yeah.
How long after being in the police did you do that?
I was in the police for about 7 years, and then I transitioned back into the security industry. The reason for that was, with the police, it was a great job, and hats off to all the policemen out there. They do a brilliant job. But what I found in the police was, so prior to me joining, as I said, I had these kind of other aspirations and to do things like sort of personal training, and I wanted to compete as well. And to compete, you had to train hard, fight camps and stuff. So you kind of had to train really hard. Also with the personal training as well, again, it's all to do with training. And the police just didn't give me that flexibility I needed to do the jobs, whereas the security role did. So I kind of left the police, went back into the security. And the other thing was as well, the pay wasn't really that different. So I had the flexibility, the flexibility to do what I wanted to do, and I'm still essentially getting the same pay.
So the main thing is flexible
yeah, the main thing
with the security industry.
Yeah, the main thing was the flexibility, and it wasn't. It kind of wasn't. While I was in the police, I felt like it was killing my ambitions. And you know what? When I left, I did manage while doing the security role. I managed to do all the things that I wanted to do because of the flexibility that the role actually offers. It's
almost like the perfect side hustle, really.
Yeah, it really is, honestly. And even from a young age, any sort of college students, uni students, you're studying, or if you're working somewhere else and you want to earn a bit of extra money, getting your SIA badge is the way to go, because there's so many security agencies out there where, as long as you've got a badge, you can literally just ring them up and they'll call you on a weekend and you can make a bit of money on the side.
Can work pretty much anywhere. And
yeah,
speaking of job roles, what kind of roles have you worked in your security career?
I think I've pretty much done it all. Door supervisor, CCTV, close protection. So I've done quite a lot in security.
A preference out of any of those?
I think the most interesting one, I think the most sort of exciting one was door supervisor. I mean, close protection, it sounds very, very sort of interesting. And it offers other challenges, but the challenges rarely happen. Whereas door supervisor, you're going to go to the club, there's going to be a room full of 1,000 people, 2,000 people, possibly drunk, getting into all sort of mischief, and it's your job to sort it out, to spot it and respond. So there's going to be some action going on.
And how do you think that your time in the police has helped you with working in security?
Yeah, so for me personally, it was a case of, because I started the security so young. When I started, it was more a case of, all right, lad, over here, and they used to put me on the kind of fire exit doors. I was always inside the club, on the fire exit door. Yeah, I kind of worked my way up within the club, but it wasn't really. You didn't have that kind of growth environment where they would kind of teach you and develop you. So it was kind of like you just kind of had to pick things up by yourself. Whereas when I went into the police, I got a much more in-depth knowledge of the law, criminal and civil laws as well, and the use of force and how to respond to certain situations, essentially without getting yourself into trouble.
And did you find, coming out of the police and looking for roles in the security industry, it was a lot easier? So obviously because of your experience.
Funny enough, yes, the police on my CV looked really good, and it helped me get roles within the security industry. But vice versa, when I applied for the police, one of the things that they actually really highlighted was the fact that I had a security background. So it was actually the security background helped me get into the police, and then vice versa. So they both helped each other,
Perfect. And in terms of challenges faced working in security roles and working as a police officer, how do they vary?
So I would say both roles are very similar in the sense that you're there to sort of uphold the law, to spot criminal activity, respond to emergencies, so on and so forth. Now, how they vary is with the police, you're in uniform. Normally when you turn up to a situation, most people do comply. The uniform kind of demands respect. I think a lot of people understand that the police have a lot more powers, extra powers of arrest, so they know the boundaries where they'll push tends to be lower. However, in saying that, when you do have someone who's willing to go beyond that boundary, they usually go from 0 to 100. So the situation can kind of very quickly escalate to a very high risk situation, like up there at the utmost. With the security, it's actually harder because the security uniform doesn't demand that much kind of respect. You don't have that automatic sort of compliance. People always push you to a higher limit. So you're generally with security, you're always kind of having to use your conflict management skills a lot more. Whereas with the police, what I'm saying is, I guess with the police, when you turn up, it's either they're complying or not. So the conflict management, it comes into play sometimes. But with the security, conflict management's constantly being used because people will push your buttons and they will try to kind of drag you into situations that you don't want to get into. So you have to have your conflict management skills has to be there, a lot more refined, honed in.
So I think a big thing there is obviously the lack of respect for security professionals, especially compared to police officers. So what do you think, in your opinion, can be done to kind of improve their perception?
So I think at the moment, the best thing that security operatives can do is work on their own communication skills, work on how they deal with the public, and that will automatically... I mean, there's two ways of seeing this. You can either try and get respect through fear, which we don't want, or we can get respect because people genuinely like us. And this is, I often find that getting respect through the way you act towards people and sort of empathizing with their needs is you'll get a lot better response than actually trying to put that fear into people. So first of all, we need to get out of the mindset of trying to gain compliance through fear. I think that's what I'm saying. So we need to get out of the mindset of gaining compliance through fear. We need to improve our own brand. We need to improve our own communication skills, and definitely definitely when it comes to conflict management, how we can get a situation which is potentially going to escalate, how we can sort of lower it down.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like the main thing is to kind of treat people how you want to be treated.
Exactly.
I mentioned earlier, obviously, during your time in police, you got to know the ins and outs, basically, of the use of force. But why is the use of force such a critical topic for security professionals?
The reason why the use of force is such a critical topic is because whenever there's a situation where you find that a security operative has been arrested, majority of the time it's because they've been found to use excessive force. It's a situation that's escalated. They've had to use physical intervention. They've acted too soon, or they haven't acted correctly, and the force they used was found to be excessive. So that's why it is, for me, it's one of the most critical sort of points, because it's, if you understand the use of force, it will prevent, because we've got some really good guys out there. Look, we've got some really good security operatives. They've got all the best intentions, and it's unfortunate that you've got someone there who's actually there to do good, and because of his lack of knowledge of the law, he gets himself into a lot of trouble, which is a shame.
And I suppose a big question that people do have when it comes to using force is, say if someone has a weapon, you're working in a bar club, someone comes at you with a weapon, say a machete. Yeah. What are the laws around the use of force then if someone does have a weapon?
Yeah, good question. We get this question a lot of the times when we're teaching the physical intervention, because obviously the people are worried about weapons as well, and obviously there's a lot higher. So when I mentioned sort of the resistance someone's using against you, and you match them with a level of force which is matched to the resistance, the level of force that they're using, resistance or force, let's say, that they're using, I'd say is the ultimate. So having a machete, swinging it around, trying to cut people, you've got a deadly use of force there, haven't you? Which could end up with people being sort of severely hurt or even killed. So even in that situation, a lot of people ask, well, what can I do? Well, first of all, what's number one priority is your own safety. So this is only if, and then we've got this very kind of what if scenario. If you feel it's safe to do so, and if you can, and if it's the only option, you can pick up a chair and put it over his head, because was it necessary? Well, hell yeah, I'd say it was necessary. He's entered a venue, swinging a machete around, people are going to get hurt, you're going to get hurt. Was it reasonable? I'd say a chair against a machete, yeah, is very, very reasonable. I guess what I'm saying is the formula, if you can use that formula, you basically match whatever resistance they show, you use that formula and it can be applied to any level of force.
So if someone has a weapon,
you can pick something up, as long as look, you can't. What you can't do is you can't say, I've got a machete. You've suddenly, because obviously there's other legalities. Well, why were you carrying a machete in the first place? Yeah. So someone's got a machete. I see a chair or a fire hydrant. Because then I am allowed to instantly arm myself to protect myself. So if I see something that I can use, or even a table to keep between me and him, and maybe push it onto him somehow, just keep a barrier. So there's all these, there's all these other things. As long as, like I said, as long as you apply the same formula, you'll be okay.
So just protect yourself at all costs.
Just protect yourself, yeah. Protect yourself at all costs. Make sure it's necessary, reasonable. and you're okay.
And to clarify, use of force isn't just about physical altercations, fights, or anything like that. There's a lot more to it as well, isn't there?
So no. I mean, physical intervention is anything we do which can essentially restrict someone's movement. So it can literally be me putting my arm around someone, not even touching them, but me actually putting my arm behind them and pointing in a direction. I'm now kind of, in a way, I'm restricting their movement and I'm making them go in a certain direction. So even for me to actually do that, I need to understand when I would do that. So I think when we talk about when, where, and how, for example, I would only put my arm round or behind someone and point them in a direction if I first ask them verbally to do it. And let's say they might be a bit drunk, a little bit incoherent, where I need to start using body language. If I go straight in and put my arm behind them and just point, and let's say they start walking and fall over, well, it could be found that they've fallen over because of me, because at that point I was the one in control of them. So no, physical intervention isn't just about fighting. There's a lot of other scenarios where it comes in, and the use of force.
And how does kind of improving your knowledge as a security professional about the use of force help maybe you become a better security officer, and also help the public?
So, you know the old saying, knowledge is power, right? You know, and as Uncle Ben says, you know, with great power comes great responsibility. But yeah, all jokes aside, obviously I'm quoting Spider-Man, but it's on that note, it's if you have knowledge, you're more confident. So, for example, if you know the laws and you're going into a situation and you know how to deal with that situation, you're going to have a lot more confidence. Now, confident people tend to act more correctly. It's when someone's not confident in the law, when they're going into a situation and they're not quite sure of how to respond or react, or they're not quite sure of, is what I'm doing correct or not? They tend to get nervous, anxious, and that's when mistakes happen.
And what would you say are the main mistakes that security professionals do make?
Acting too soon, not using enough, not hanging around the kind of conflict management zone long enough, not using up all other resources. What I mean by that is, you know, have you used up all your inhibitors, you know, all the stuff we learn in the SI courses? Have you tried long enough to try and prevent it from going into physical intervention by using good communication? That's basically what I'm saying. Then when they go into, let's say there's a scenario where they have to go into physical intervention, they go in from, when you go into physical intervention, you start from zero. So you're using your conflict management, your communication skills. Then you would go in, you'd start from zero. And what I mean by zero would be, it would literally be, let's say if I'm asking someone to leave a premises, I wouldn't even touch them. I would literally put my arm behind them, which is almost signaling, look, you're not going backwards, you're going forward. So now I've entered the realms of restriction. So I've entered the realms of physical intervention. I start from there and I point. If he moves, great. We stay there. We don't need to touch the guy. Now, if I touch him and start pushing him and he's moving anyway, what have I just done? I've just used excessive force. So if he doesn't move, what do I do next? I don't grab him in a headlock and start dragging him out and throw him out. From there, then I give him a slight tap on the back. So I've got this very sort of, when we teach a very kind of 0.5, not even 1. You'd go, I'm talking about use, like the level of force you use, it would be on 0, 0.5, 1, 1.5. So you're going up in these small increments. It's when the mistake happens is when they go, right, come on, out. The guy doesn't move. Next thing you know, the guy's literally grabbed him by the collar. That becomes excessive. Now, the problem there is, if it's excessive force being used on him, he now has the right to defend and protect himself. So he turns around out of fear, does something to protect himself. Next thing you know, the thing he does, the security operative now gets annoyed. Now we've got an escalation, isn't it? It kind of really just starts escalating, jumping up. I've seen some really good security operatives. I've seen champion cage fighters, and they're working the doors, and the subjects square on punched him in the face, and the guy's just taken it on the chin, laughed, pinned his arms down, and just walked him out. It's great, and it was so great to see that, because this was when I was young, and I really learned from that. This was one particular moment I remember this was around 2000, and this actually happened in one of the clubs. I'm not going to say where it was, in one of the clubs, and the guy, he got hit, and I remember standing there thinking, because I know who this guy is, right? He's like, this guy's a dangerous guy. He's a really good fighter. And he just laughed, shrugged it off, pinned his arms down, and walked him out. And I thought it was just brilliant. And I always remember that moment. And I teach that moment in my classes as well. And again, it's understanding that if you, again, like a scenario like that, if you get hit, it's understanding that, look, if you've got a drunk guy that's just hit you, and he's, hasn't done much damage, you still don't need to go forceful with him. You don't need to go into retaliation mode, and start attacking the guy back. You can still control the situation and prevent it from escalating. Remember, the guy's drunk, he doesn't know what he's doing. This is how they need to respond to situations.
Yeah, so a big thing is just not retaliating to even either physical or even verbal abuse they may receive.
Oh yeah, verbal abuse. You're going to get people saying all sorts to you. It's sticks and stones. A lot of time, and I think ego. We have to let go of the ego. We have to let go of the ego. Again, the guy's drunk. He doesn't know what he's doing. A lot of the times, when I used to work the doors, we used to get into situations, and literally the next day, the guy would come to the venue and be apologizing. Sometimes with like presents, like some chocolates or something, just saying sorry about my behavior last night, because he just doesn't know what he's doing. And this is what we're there to do. The interesting thing is, we always, when I speak to some security operatives, you always hear you kind of hear them saying, well, I'm not here to take this shit, excuse the term. But actually you are. This is part of the job. We're there to take shit, and we're there to take, these people are drunk, they're going to say all sorts, and we're there to just take it, water off a duck's back, and just deal with it, and also we still have a duty of care for that person. Just because someone's sworn at you, it doesn't mean you deserve to end up in hospital. So
very true. Developing a thicker skin.
Yeah.
So what's one piece of advice you would give to a security professional when it comes to using force?
Yeah. So first of all, it would be understand the laws behind the use of force. When I mean understand them in depth. So I would probably say play out the scenarios in your head, kind of like sort of almost doing role plays in your mind. So if this happens, how would I respond? Check out if that's correct. And then if they do this, how would I respond if they do that? So it's almost like sort of role playing. And when I do speak to some security companies out there, I do say to them, look, arrange for once a month or once every 2 months, get your guys together, do some role plays. So head of security can just kind of overlook it. You don't need to have an SIA instructor there. You can just go through some role plays. Or what you do is do some sort of pick up on some incidences that might have happened during that month. Dig them back out the files and go through the scenario and say, right, okay, so how could we have dealt with this situation better? So that's one. Now, two is, depending on where you're working, if you are in a high risk environment, especially if you're working clubs or any sort of environment where you are going to be physically hands-on, you can't just rely on your knowledge alone. You have to be physically there, in the sense that you have to do some form of physical training. You can't just do an SIA one-day physical intervention. And by the way, I hear a lot of the times, the SIA, they don't do enough to teach security operatives. How much do you want them to do? In my opinion, the SIA course is very fit for purpose. So it's already a 6-day course. For you to, let's say if I was to take you and I wanted you to become physically competent at using physical intervention, you would have to literally train with me for 3 months, because this isn't just a knowledge thing. I would have to sort of hone in your motor skills, and you'd have to practice. You literally got to practice something 1,000 times for it to become instinct. So you can't. So how long do you want the SIA course to be? And this is the thing. So it's not up to the SIA do a very good job in the initial kind of stages of what people need to know to get into the industry. So basically, what the security companies out there need to do is get their guys together so they can do some further training. Even if it doesn't have to be martial arts. It can even be just gym training, physical fitness, because we do know that most of what you're gonna use in a physical altercation is your fitness. So if you're not fit, anything you've learned isn't going to work anyway. You need to have a certain level of fitness and strength and motor skills.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, especially talking about the actual training course, because people already moan it's 6 days or however many days long. And the moves taught, again, we're not training fighters. So when it's like you teach a block and it's like, well, what about if the person does this? The person could do anything.
Exactly. And this is the thing. There's infinite scenarios, isn't there? So and it's you get this kind of the people they're coming out now, and you get the companies moaning and saying, the people coming out they're physically not good enough and stuff. Well, yeah, because they've had 1 day training. Why don't you help yourself? If you want good security operatives, invest some time and money in training your security operatives, and that's what should be happening. And this is what was good about the police. They invested time and money into their training. When I was throughout all my years in the police, there was continuous development going on.
Now, you touched on previous about knowing the ins and outs of the law around use of force. What are the main legal aspects that security professionals should be aware of when it comes to the use of force?
Yeah, so the security professionals need to be aware of sort of the when, where, and how to use force. So what I mean by that is the when and where is, have we used up all the other resources we have, like sort of conflict management? And also there are some other sort of tricks to the industry where, let's say, for example, I'm dealing with a large guy. If I try to go in physically with him, the likelihood he's probably going to try it on because he's a lot larger. So he's got that confidence that I'm going to get some form of physical resistance. Now, so I'm trying to avoid that. So what other skills can I use? So what I'll do is I'll call backup and I'll call 2 or 3 people, not so we can jump on the guy, but because I know that when he sees 2 or 3 people, he might automatically think, okay, well, now there's 2 or 3 of them, I'm outnumbered, maybe I should just comply. And without getting into any sort of physical altercation, the person's just going to leave. So I've just kind of used, the art of fighting without fighting, which is great because we can always, there's always 99.9% of the time, there's always another option. Okay. Now, so it's understanding when we go into physical intervention is we use all other options, and we've got to be good at knowing what sort of options we can use. And that's going back to the kind of role play scenarios. We learn that as we do these sort of role play scenarios. So how is the force being used? Is it reasonable? Is it necessary? Are we using the minimum amount of force needed to get the job done? And what I mean by that is, the way I like to think of it is, the amount of force that I will use is dependent on the amount of resistance the subject shows me. So, for example, however you want to think of it, you can think of it from a scale of 0 to 100, or you can think of it on a scale of 0 to 10. If, let's say, I want to remove someone, just for example, one scenario is ejection. So if I need to remove someone from a venue for whatever reason, and the person's showing me a resistance of level 2, right? We'll stick to level 2. Now, level 2, let's say he's just being a git and he's just standing still, right? When I come in, if I go from 0 to 10 and I put him in a headlock, choke him out, drag him out by his feet, that's obviously going to be really excessive. If he's just showing me a level 2 where he's just being resistant and I come in and then I put my hand behind his back, he still doesn't move, and then I give him a light nudge and I'm kind of just nudging him along, that's just about enough to get the job done. So what I'm doing is I'm matching his resistance. Maybe going, if he's at a 2, maybe I'll go 2, 2.2, 2.5, slightly higher, just so that would be the minimum amount of force needed to get the job done. But again, it's like we're going back to the whole the physical confidence thing, isn't it? If someone's not physically confident in controlling the person, or they're scared because they're thinking in their mind, well, hang on, what if I do go to a level 2 and he turns around and tries to punch me? I myself or someone else might have the confidence to maybe be able to respond to that situation. But if the person physically doesn't have that capability, he's not confident. So what does he do? He calls 2, 3, 4 of his mates and they all jump on him, choke him out, and then drag him out. And then you've got a problem. You've got excessive force, haven't you? So yeah.
Yeah, I think the big one there is obviously using the least amount of force.
Exactly.
Reasonable. And as well, obviously, if you come in and escalate the situation massively, the person might have their friends and they'll see it, and it just causes a huge ruckus.
Exactly.
Now, what would you say is the main reason that there is such a big kind of knowledge gap for security professionals when it comes to the use of force?
I think in the security industry, there's a lot of job roles. I mean, we have people that work there's the job roles from literally opening and closing a gate in a warehouse, right the way through to sort of high risk, maybe sort of door supervisor environments, close protection environments. And because of that, we have all sorts of people that come into the industry. Now, a lot of the time what happens is if you've got someone who doesn't want to work on a club and they work as let's say in a warehouse, they themselves don't feel they need to learn the rules behind the use of force and physical intervention, because very rarely are they going to use that in their job. However, there is something to be said that the fact is we have a kind of minimum standard that we want to go into the industry. So they reach that standard, that's great. But then they don't, they kind of don't bother continuing it because it's just not something in their job. So then what happens is you take that person, a lot of the time that person now, someone needs a cover in a venue. Let's say the agency hasn't got anyone else but this guy, and he just thinks, okay, just send him to a club for that the 1 or 2 days. But he's been in the industry for 3 years, now working in a warehouse. He's never even had to eject someone. So now you've put him into an environment where he has to use that skill and he hasn't practiced. So yeah, while yes, he's done that minimum standard to come in, and while yes, he in that job role, he doesn't need to use it. This is now we're going back to, this is why all sort of security agencies need to continue that growth and development, because you never know, sort of like I said, once a month practicing those scenarios, because you never know when you need that guy and you're going to put him in to cover someone else, and this is what's lacking.
I suppose another kind of big problem is someone who maybe works at loads of different venues or different types of roles.
Yeah.
And they all have kind of different rules and
policies
when it comes to using force between themselves.
Different rules, yeah, different. The rules, the policies and the rules can't override law. So as long as they know the law, wherever they go, they should be fine. Policy-wise, that's different. Obviously, for example, you might have a sort of celebrity club where they might say, okay, I don't want you to eject someone as the manager. I want to go and speak to them first. They might have different things, but when it comes to actually using force, the law is always the same. There is no policy that can override the use of force once we get into that situation.
Now, talking more about the actual law itself, what can security professionals make sure they do to make sure they stay on the right side of the law?
Yeah. So continued professional development. Do the courses, conflict management courses, use of force reading. There's so much knowledge out there on Google, and I honestly recommend at least go to a gym and get yourself physically fit to a certain point where if anything ever happens, you've at least, at minimum, if you're ever in a situation where you feel in danger, you have the fitness to run, get out of there. And that's like the most practical self-defense tip I can give anyone. But imagine if you're not fit and healthy, you can't even get away from a situation, and you end up being no good to anyone. So that, at a minimum, go to a gym. What I recommend you do, go join a judo class, jiu-jitsu. There are a lot of martial arts you can do. I prefer sort of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, judo, because it's good, because in security, you always want to avoid hitting someone. And these sort of martial arts are very good at controlling, without hitting a person. And they're very good. You will learn a lot of good stuff.
So you mentioned there, obviously, you've trained in the likes of MMA, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, all sorts of martial arts. How do you find doing this kind of training helps you kind of keep your cool? Obviously, we talked about earlier developing a thicker skin. How do you find that it helps you stay calm in escalated situations?
So imagine while you're training, let's say you're, especially even a normal, training a normal sort of schedule, which is like 2-3 times a week. 2-3 times a week, you're going to an actual class, and you're having that kind of combat situation with someone who's trained himself as well, and there's that constant competition, and you're sometimes, when you're doing fight camp, let's say if there's a fight coming up and you're training, you're actually fighting against seasoned professionals. So these are trained guys, these are killers. So you're there fighting them. You can't be bothered to actually. You can't be bothered to actually get into any altercations outside. You kind of look at the person. You've got your drunk guy that hits you. It really it's kind of like nothing. It's laughable, because you're doing this 3-4 times a week and you just can't be bothered. So I guess when you're training in these, what I'm saying is when you're training in these situations, you won't get so sort of emotionally upset. That's what I'm saying. You won't be so emotionally upset because you've been hit hundreds of times throughout that week. And you've dealt with it emotionally anyway, so you can, you learn to kind of keep it down. So I guess that's one of the advantages when you're doing it in a gym. You don't care about someone swearing at you or even giving you a slight hit outside. You can usually take it a lot better.
I suppose it probably increases your ability to understand what is an actual perceived threat and what isn't as well.
Exactly as well. Yeah, perfect actually. Yeah. So exactly. So you've kind of like you've got this scenario where you're in a gym or in a dojo, and this is a real threat. This guy can really, really fight. You know what you can do. And then you've got your drunk guy who can hardly stand. He can hardly stand. And he's swearing at you, or he's just kind of swung a punch which is missed. It's like completely missed you. You know, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to respond to that situation.
100%.
Yeah.
Now let's go back to obviously the use of force and the police. So what are the police looking for when it comes to the use of force, especially from a security professional?
So when they turn up to a scene, it's very easy for them to see someone lying on the ground and you've got a security operative standing there, and automatically they'll think, right, okay, you have criminal and you have victim. Okay. So at that point, it's very important what the security operative initially tells the police. So for example, why did you hit that guy on the ground? Well, because he hit me. So that now, you're going to get arrested for that. Why? Because that's an act of retaliation. You haven't explained, actually, according to the law, you haven't justified your force, have you? Why did you hit him? Well, he hit me. That doesn't really, so now that's an act of retaliation. You decided to knock him out and drop him on the ground. Now, as opposed to, why did you hit him? He swung for me once. He hit me once. I had a true and honest belief that he was going to swing for me again. He raised his fist. He had an angry look on his face, and he told me he was going to kill me. Whoa. Situation changes completely, doesn't it? Now you have self-defense. Not, oh, why did you hit him? Well, because he hit me. So this is where, again, if security operatives understand the law more, they can explain their own actions in a better way. And this is what it's about. So they'll keep them. So what the police are looking for when they arrive, well, they're looking for to see if there's someone who's broken the law, a criminal, and a victim. Now all of a sudden it would change. The person on the floor, they'll realize, oh, hang on a minute, actually he tried to assault him, and this is what's happened. Rather than, okay, well, you've obviously just knocked him out. Let's arrest you, bring you in, and let's try and find out what happened when you're inside.
I can imagine as well having an understanding of your surroundings. Be like, okay, I've got body cam on here,
yep.
Evidence here, the CCTV here and here. It'll back up exactly.
Absolutely,
what I'm saying.
yeah. Understanding evidence and how evidence works, so you can, like you said, body cam, understanding where the cameras are pointing, and that's a really good thing actually. Knowing your camera layout is really good. And whenever I used to work in a venue, I used to know what the camera layout was. So if I was actually dealing with a customer that I thought, okay, this could potentially get into a sort of physical altercation, I used to try and lead it into the camera's eye so they can see what went on, because once things happen out of the problem is if something isn't caught on a camera, now you're relying on witness accounts. Problem is, we know that witness accounts aren't so reliable because it all depends on their own emotional state. You're in a club, people might be drunk, they might be taking drugs, they might be friends of the subject. So now all of a sudden they see things very differently to what they actually were. So always try to kind of lead the situation into an area where everything's recorded.
So what advice would you give to a security professional to always keep in the back of the head to make sure that they are aligned with the police?
Like I said, it's the advice would be stay calm. Don't react too soon. Always try to be in sight of camera, so you have evidence backing you up. So you're not just relying on witness accounts, and understand the law, and work on your physical ability as well. So you've got 5 points there.
And are there any examples of, obviously, your understanding of the use of force, how that's really helped you in a certain situation?
Yeah, there was a situation at a venue where, this is just one of many, by the way, because it's something that we apply all the time. But one situation it was the end of the night. It was about 45 minutes till the venue completely closes. And so we've closed the doors. It's only people leaving, no one coming back in. And there was 4 guys outside. They were very persistent in that they wanted to come in. They weren't taking no for an answer. And at that point, when we were outside, it was on camera. So it was great. Everything's on camera. However, what happened was they decided to, I think, again, you kind of had that group kind of effect, didn't you? They were gassing each other up, and they decided to find, first of all, I feel that first of all, they were it started off as almost like a jokey type thing, trying to push through, but then it became serious when they saw that, well, they thought we wasn't gonna use any force on them. Then they kind of tried to really push their way through, and one of them managed to barge me kind of inwards, where out of the sight of the camera, and he swung for me. It ended up in a situation where he was unconscious on the floor, and the police arrived. Obviously, whenever the police asked, okay, what happened, this is the initial thing. He hit him, and you think, oh crap. So it's like, well, it didn't just, and you want to straight away say, no, it didn't happen like that. He was outside trying to push through. And then you're there like, so I kind of explained it. The good thing was we had cameras, showed them the time they arrived, showed them that they were trying to push through. Didn't see the main altercation, but it showed that they were being gits basically and trying to push their way through. And also I had another witness inside the venue as well, which said, yeah, when he pushed his way through, Oz tried to still guide him out, and then he swung, and then that's when the altercation happened.
Yeah, so if you didn't really know what you were doing in that situation, it could have been a lot of trouble for you with the police. And
yeah, absolutely, because if they were walking in, okay, so again, if the police had walked in and gone, okay, so what happened? Everyone's saying, well, he hit him, that's what happened, and then you turn around and they turn around and ask you, well, what happened? And you say, well, he tried to push his way in, so I knocked him out. That's not going to go down. That's not going to go down very well, is it? Trouble. Yeah. So, and it's like what the police are looking for is, how did you feel? I had a genuine fear for my safety. He swung at me, so now I have a genuine fear for my safety. You've got 4 guys. I'm also thinking, right, I have a team. If he actually managed to make contact, I'm on the ground. Now my team is down 1 man. Imagine if all the guys managed to come in. Now we've got 4 violent individuals in the venue who I can guarantee this situation is going to really blow out of hand, probably with other people in the venue. So not only am I trying to protect myself, but I'm trying to protect my team and the other people in the venue. So from me explaining it that way to the police, they're like, okay, that's fair enough. It's fair enough. So yeah,
that situation could have been a lot worse. Now, going back to what security companies can do, what would you say is the main thing that every security company should do to help train their staff when it comes to the use of force?
So I think what security companies need to do is at least once a month gather all the information they've got from their incident reports and talk about you can talk about 2 things. Obviously, talk about situations that actually ended up in physical intervention or the use of force, and talk about how to prevent what could have been done to prevent it getting to that point, number 1, or discuss how the physical force could have been applied in a safer fashion. Not saying that the person got injured, but I'm saying we can always improve and prevent injury, because that the person may not get injured then, but if it happens again on a second time, they could be injured. And also talk about other situations where customers are just generally not happy. It could be things like, because in security we have something called sort of primary control and secondary control. Primary control, using primary control methods is always really good, because primary control methods is like having cameras there, having signs, having ropes. It's kind of like controlling a crowd without even a security person, a security operative having to actually go into any sort of form of physical intervention. Cameras are a part of primary control, because a lot of people, when they see cameras, they know they're in cameras, so they won't do things. So talk about, well, what other primary control methods can we use? Talk about situations where I think, okay, so let's say we have a situation where we have underage people constantly, going up to a bar and trying to buy drinks. Well, what we could do is maybe put some more signs around, making people aware that people underage won't be served. Or we have a situation where, let's say there's a lot of fights in a particular venue. Okay, so rather than just relying on the security to be so really good at actually going in and physically dealing with the situation, we could put up maybe more signs, just telling them, look, this sort of behavior won't be tolerated, you will be ejected. And that might be, again, it's a primary control is more of a preventative measure, so we can talk about more primary control and secondary control, once a month at least. And I think that would be good. That would kind of keep all your guys sharp and up to date.
As well, I mean, it's not just physical intervention we want to go over as well. It's things like first aid, emergencies, all these different emergencies, which should be addressed once a month at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If there was any first aid incidents, it might be that there was a first aid incident and the first aid kit wasn't fully kitted out. So, okay, why wasn't it? And let's put some measures. Again, let's put some measures in place to make sure who's checking it when it's being checked, to make sure that we've got all the care kit so we can look after someone if they are injured.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Ozzie, it's been an absolute pleasure. But before we wrap it up, one final question. What's the main takeaway you want to give to anybody watching this around the use of force?
The main takeaway is upgrade your knowledge. Try and do some form of physical exercise. Be calm. Don't jump in too soon. And remember, your own safety is priority number one. If you get hurt, you're no good to anyone.
Put yourself first.
Yeah, put yourself first. And I know it sounds selfish, but if you don't and you get injured, then you can't help anyone.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
That's
you.
all for us. We'll see you on the next one.